Welcome to this episode of Against the Mountains of Madness. I'm your host, Jason.
And I'm John Wright.
And on this episode, we're going to be discussing the two questions from the TV series Babylon 5. The Shadows question, what do you want? And the Vorlons question, who are you? So, John, have you watched Babylon 5? I assume you have. It's 20 years old.
I'm a big
There'll
fan
be no
of
spoilers.
Babylon 5. I'm sorry, I talked over you. Yes, I'm a big fan of Babylon 5. I've watched all seasons of it, and I hope to watch it again someday.
Okay. Yes, I've enjoyed it as well. I've watched it through a couple of times. And all the movies they made with it, and the Crusade series they spun off from it, which I quite enjoyed. And the Legends of the Rangers pilot TV show that really wasn't very good, unfortunately, and didn't get picked up. But yes. Oh, and I've read the books too. They did a lot of spin-off. They did a bunch of spin-off books that were fun. But yes, Babylon 5. So I'm pretty sure we can give spoilers for a 20-plus-year-old series that seems mildly cursed given the number of actors that have died. I mean, it was 20 years ago, I suppose, but quite a few of them have passed away, unfortunately.
It's sad.
But, well, it is life. But yes, Babylon 5, the space
Well, actually,
station.
the opposite in this case. If you pass away, that's not life. That's the termination of life.
Well, that's true. But
hopefully you know who you are and what you want before that happens.
Yes. But Bruce Boxleitner is still around and has turned up in the Orville as the president of the Federation. I saw the character and I laughed when I just who is that? Why do I know that voice? And I looked it up and had a good laugh. So
I'm a fan of the Orville because it seems to me it's one of the best Star Trek spin-offs since the original series, even though it's not Star Trek.
Well, this is true.
Yeah.
Anyway, Babylon 5. So Babylon 5 was a series that ran about the same time as Deep Space Nine. And people have always argued which one stole from the other because they're both set on a space station.
Is that actually a debate? It's really clear that Deep Space Nine stole from Babylon 5. Because Babylon 5 was the guy who introduced the whole idea of story arcs where your episodes had to be sought in order because you're having your B plot line was going to tie into greater and greater events later on. And Babylon 5 had not been doing that until after... belay that. Deep Space Nine had not been doing it until after Babylon 5 innovated it.
Oh, yes. No, I know.
9 comes after 5 anyway in the number line, so I mean, it's clear.
There you go. Yes, I do like... I'm very happy that happened too, because I like the Deep Space Nine story arcs that they put in the later seasons. And I like that Babylon 5 had a 5-year plan from the get-go.
Yeah.
Although the first season's a bit hit and miss, and is a bit monster of the weeky in places, and the last season feels a little tacked on because they're worried about being cancelled, and lots of fans don't like it. But I don't mind the last season. It's not as good.
I thought the last season was fine. I thought the writing was good enough to hide the fact that it was being rushed.
That's fair. And
I thought at the time when I saw it, I said, "This is Lord of the Rings in space. This is as big and epic. This is as impressive and as deep as anything I've ever read in a book," which for TV at the time was rare. So I was really impressed with Babylon 5.
Oh, there you go. No, I loved it too. It's a great series. Tells a really great story, and yeah, it was episodic at the time, but it was weekly at the time. But it did what all the Netflix shows do these days, where they tell one big story over a whole 12 episodes or whatever.
But he started the ball rolling. I mean, I guess you could say late night soaps like Dallas or soap operas do a similar thing, but this is the first time I at least saw it in science fiction context. So, and I also like the fact that his Star Furies rotate in space without making banked turns like you need for an atmosphere to do. There's just a number of things that I just thought were. It didn't offend my science fiction sensibilities, especially when you're also doing things like digging up ancient shadow vessels on Mars and finding out there's something deeper and darker and still alive involved in your probing into things man was not meant to know. I also like the fact that he was, I suspect, not religious himself, just from the way it was treated, but he was respectful to religion. It wasn't just it wasn't just what I call Serapicism. Serapicism is the theory that all religion is the statue of Serapis in Alexandria, which is hollow, so you can have an acolyte inside, mimicking oracles to come out of the mouth of the idol through a speaking tube. When the statue of Serapis was pulled down by Christians, it broke and turned out to be not solid gold but hollow, with a rat's nest inside. And so anyone who thinks that religion is just the opportunity to fool the proles, to fool the unwary, that tends to be the commonplace way religion is portrayed in science fiction. See Gather Darkness by Fritz Lieber, for example, or see the way the gods of Star Trek operate, if you want to talk about it at one of our previous shows. But not Straczynski. In this, religion was treated kind of faithfully, and even organized religion. There were orders of monks, for example, who were like computer counter-espionage people, or techno-mages and stuff, who were doing good works. So I rather liked his attitude toward a number of things. Both religion and politics seem to be mature and complex. And I like the way that his characters at times would seem to be villains and turn out later on to be heroes. And vice versa. You got to know them. They were three-dimensional. And some of them got involved. Some of them got tempted and went down a dark path, even though they were kind of likable fellows at first. And if you want to mention the temptation, you can talk about what the two questions are and what they mean.
Well, I was going to say, yes, Londo particularly. Well, Londo and Jakar do that. Jakar at the start is he's angry and bitter and hates the Centauri and wants to see them destroyed.
But for an understandable reason, because they had been conquering his planet, the slave camps and the gulags and so on and so forth.
They destroyed his world, but...
They destroyed his world.
By the end of the series, he's not... That's not Jakar anymore. He's had a religious awakening. He's seen the error of his ways and he's repented. And Londo starts out as this amiable buffoon almost.
Yep.
But is tempted by, the lure of greatness. I guess that brings us to the question. So in Babylon 5, for anyone that hasn't seen the show, go away and watch it now. We'll wait. All 5 seasons of it. There's two ancient race factions that were left in, as you learn later in the series, were left in charge of the younger races to shepherd them forward. And it turns out they've lost their way a bit, and they're not doing quite what they were supposed to do. But you have the Vorlons on the one hand, which represent law and order, and at the start good, but they're sort of portrayed as the good guys.
You and I have a disagreement on this point. I consider them to be unambiguously the good guys in the early seasons, and unambiguously bad guys in later seasons, because they turn out to be lawful neutral, not lawful good.
Fair enough. No, I'd agree with that.
That interpretation requires Kosh to be unique. He's uniquely good, and the rest of his race is just cruel. And I think that's more the fact that the writer had to make them not unambiguously good so that they would not solve all the problems. They were depicted as fairly angelic beings. Now, maybe they were sinister beings pretending to be angels. There's a hint that that's true, too.
Yep.
But the shadows were always the most sinister and scary beings imaginable because, for one thing, you couldn't tell if they were in the room with you or not.
That's true.
And for another, they were these giant, spidery, psychic creatures.
Yep.
And when their spokesmen come on stage, their spokesmen have some of the most sinister and excellent speeches for evil you've ever want to hear. And I interrupted you. You were about to say the shadows were going to drive evolution through another means, not through law and order.
Well, that's it.
But through chaos, but through warfare.
Yes. So, I mean, how do I phrase this? They both have a point. I think later on, when you sort of see the philosophies they're coming from, the Vorlons want, like you say, the Vorlons are cruel, but I think part of their cruelty is just, and part of the shadows' evil, it stems from the fact that they're not concerned with individuals anymore. They're concerned with the fates of all of the races in the galaxy and making sure they reach the point they're supposed to reach. I think they've lost their. I think the races have lost their way, and they're misguided in their quest at this point. but
certainly by the later season, that was the portrayal. That was when Kosh is replaced by an ambassador who treats the psychic girl, I can't remember her name, very cruelly. He's
Lita. Yep.
Lita is very mean to her, and Kosh himself, the early Kosh was not that way.
Well, he's
again,
not...
it might have been a personality difference between the two characters, or it might have been the writer realized he couldn't have a very powerful, very good race on stage without them solving all the problems for the main characters. I suspect the latter rather than the former, but I could be wrong.
Well, I mean, so that's the thing. The new ambassador Kosh is he mean to Lita? He just treats her as, I guess he just treats her as property. This is wrong, but
that's what I mean by cruel. Treating a person like property is cruel. Let's agree on that definition.
But he doesn't seem in I don't know. It's been a little while since I've watched it. Maybe I'm misremembering, but he doesn't seem intentionally malicious. He just seems casually indifferent to her suffering and wants and needs and things like that.
I think casually indifferent to suffering counts.
I guess that's cruel.
Cruel covers that description.
That's fair.
And Kosh, the first Kosh, was simply not that way. There's a scene where Kosh brings the CO down to listen to some music on the lower decks among the poor and downtrodden. That's just a beautiful scene. And if you were indifferent to human life, you would not have done that. See, there's also a scene where Kosh gets out of his encounter suit to rescue. Yep. Is it Sinclair or is it
Sheridan?
The other guy? Sheridan from a fall. And by the way, as a science fiction writer, I love the fact that he was falling from 0G at the axis of a spinning O'Neill colony toward the hull, with the gravity accelerating due to centrifugal force. It was actually
the fall wasn't going to kill him.
Correctly scientific way of doing it.
Yes, the fall wasn't going to kill him. Hitting the ground was. He'd accelerated away from the exploding car.
Yeah,
and he's traveling towards the hull, but that's because that's the direction.
But he's in 0G at first because the centrifugal force in the center of the axis is 0. In the same way, I appreciate the fact that when attacking spaceships clamped onto the hull and drove a probe up into it, and then had the Marines unload through the probe, the Marines were seen climbing up with their feet on the deck. See, because the thing was spun for gravity. The whole thing was just brilliant. In any case, the Vorlons, as you said, were law and order types, and they were supposed to shepherd the younger races in a fairly hands-off way. They weren't tyrants. They weren't ruling the races. The younger races didn't even know they existed for most of their history. Whereas the Shadows wanted to encourage innovation and exciting evolution by warfare, by killing off people. And there's a scene where Sheridan is talking to their spokesman who says, have you ever wondered who it is that makes the stock market go up and down, or sets the fashion, sets the height of hems for women's fashions, or is secretly running everything? We're them. And I think one of the most stirring scenes of any science fiction show I've ever seen is when he whips out his pistol to shoot that guy and ends up leaping when a voice in his head says jump. An angelic voice, I should say, off a balcony into the center of the city of evil of Zahadum, which is the city of the shadows, because the whole thing is going to be blown up. The whole thing is going to be destroyed. That's just a great scene.
It is.
But one of the things that I think is interesting, and to draw it back to our topic, is the shadows were tempters. The shadows were trying to get people to make deals with them because they weren't their understanding with the Vorlons was that none of them would operate openly, at least at first. Later this changes. Later it erupts into a war. But Londo of the Centauri is, in the first season, as you said, is kind of a buffoonish figure and a likable figure. And a little sad because he regrets that the Centauri Republic used to be the lion of the galaxy. It used to be glorious.
And they're fading away.
He's a Byzantine figure. Imagine a Byzantine repenting the loss of half the Roman Empire and shrinking. See, so he wanted the glory days back. He wanted the days of Caesar back again. He wanted the emperor to be glorious again. So when one of the Shadows agents asks Mr. Morden, one of the great evil characters of all time, by the way.
Yes, I agree. He's great.
Asks him what he wants. He says, I want the glory days back again. But of course, what's the price for that? You'll have to watch the show to find out, because the price is high. You see?
Well,
but the Vorlons never offer people what they want. The Vorlons ask you, who are you? Who are you?
Yes.
And I don't think they're just asking for your name. Maybe there's something deeper going on.
Well, there's one of my favorite episodes of the show, Come the Inquisitor, where the Vorlons send an Inquisitor to test Delenn, who sort of is fated to be one of the leaders of the Army of Light, basically, fighting the shadows as the Vorlons' agent. And they send the Inquisitor, who, one of my favorite episodes, and the Inquisitor turns out at the end to be Jack the Ripper, and the Vorlons came to him and found him. And this is why he never killed again, because the Vorlons took him away. And right at the end, he's just...
Good luck to you in your holy cause, Captain Sheridan. May your choices have better results than mine. Remembered not as a messenger. Remembered not as a reformer. Not as a prophet. Not as a hero. Not even as Sebastian. Remembered only as Jack.
It's just like, oh, I love that scene. But he's there, and he's there as their agent, and he just keeps asking Delenn over and over, who are you? And she keeps trying to answer, and he just keeps torturing her over and over and over. Who are you? Who are you? Trying to work out who she is. And the answer at the end of the episode is, after Sheridan turns up to try and rescue her, it's, I stand for life. One life, a billion lives, it doesn't matter. Just, standing for good against evil is what it's all about. To die alone in the dark, unremembered, it doesn't matter. It's still a cause worth fighting for. It's still the right thing to do. And that's sort of the answer they come to at the hand of Jack and Sebastian, Mr. Sebastian.
He's a bad guy being used for a good purpose, and himself, he's also being informed. He's also finding out who he is at the same time. Now, the reason why it's an interesting question, and it seems to be a spiritual question, is because it's based on the assumption that you don't know who you are. Certainly a baby doesn't know. A child does not know really who he is.
No.
It's asking what your essential property is. What's the thing that makes you yourself and not someone else? What's the thing that makes you yourself and not you? You see? Now, if someone were to ask me, I, of course, would give my name, which is, of course, my family name, and then a saint's name. So that would tend to tell you that I would think of myself primarily as a member of my family first, because that's my last name. Mr. Wright is okay, that's my identity in terms of names. In China, they have a different system of naming, at least traditionally. You would have both a court name and a flower name and a artist name and a war name and various other titles you would use for various things. And likewise, among the Latins, Julius Caesar is what we call a nickname. It means fair-haired. Plato is a nickname. It means broad-shouldered, and so on and so forth. There's other naming conventions that other languages use. That's not just family, and your personal name. And most family names, at least for those of us who are not born of aristocracy in English, were professions. Wright is a woodworker. So if you said, "Who are you?" I would say John the Woodworker. Say if in the old days.
Yep.
Now, so you can identify yourself by your family. You can identify yourself by your profession. Is that really who you are? See why the question is interesting, because you start uncovering layers of what is the thing that makes you yourself as opposed to someone else, or it makes you yourself or makes you who you want to be. Because there's also a slight question of intent also. Because humans, while we can't at will change like our sex or our identity. People nowadays pretend you can, but you can't. Okay, just take it from me. You do have some latitude. The reason why that lie, and it is a lie, has some allure to it is because we do have some latitude over our self-identity. We do change from time to time what we think of ourselves as being. I used to be an atheist and now I'm a Christian. That changed everything about me, including my self-concept. You see, I used to think I was a meat robot. I used to think I was just a collection of atoms that had been thrown together by random chance.
Yep.
I now no longer think that. I no longer think that about myself. So, the question of who are you is kind of interesting, especially if you're going to identify yourself as a family name or as a profession. I'm a guy who does this. Well, what are you once you stop doing that and you do something else, you know? Or what are you if you identify yourself as a certain identity group? Well, what happens? What are you if you leave that group? You know, what are you then? Now, what do you want is also a very interesting question. And I think you and I should discuss, and I'd like your opinion on this. Why is it the bad guys ask what you want where the good guys ask who you are? What's up with that? I've never heard any other story do that. That's something that's just in Babylon 5. I thought it was a brilliant stroke, but what's it mean? Do you know what it means? Because I don't know what it means.
What do you mean? Oh, that...
Why do the bad guys ask you about your desires and the good guys ask you about your identity?
I assume the bad guys ask you about your desires because that's the most effective way to get you on board. You want something, let us fulfill your desires, and then you will be our agent. I assume that's what it was.
Keep in mind that the shadows are also... There's two other characteristics that are essential to the shadows. One is that they're invisible. They have the power to cloud men's minds, so you can't see them when they're right there. Mm-hmm. The other is that they use people as part of their technology. They wire their brains into their starships and their weapons and so on and so forth. So they don't care who you are because as far as they're concerned, you're just a resource.
Oh, yeah.
But they care what you want because then they can tie that into their system. See?
Yep.
I suspect the reason why it's evil is not just for the temptation, but it's also because they are operationalists, let us say. They look at human beings in terms of what can be done with them and what you can do for them and what you can get in return. See? Yep. And to know what you can do with someone, you need to know what drives him. You need to know what he wants.
Yep.
And of course, most human desires, I mean, to a degree, you're absolutely right. They're the evil genie who asks you the monkey paw, who's willing to grant you a wish. Okay? Well, for me to grant you a wish, I have to know what your wish is. I have to know what you want. But I noticed that no one in the show says, when they say, what do you want? No one says, I want a life of spiritual peace and contentment. I want to be right with God. That's not a good answer for the shadows. What would they do with that guy?
Well,
they'd meet a hermit. What do you want? He says, I want to serve God in prayer.
I mean,
can they offer him anything?
No, this would be St. Thomas's answer. Or as St. Augustine put it, our heart is restless until it rests in you, Lord.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
So if the shadows come and say, what do you want? And you say, I want God. I want the peace of God. What are they going to do?
Oh, they're gonna move on and look for someone else. I mean, that's interesting because they did get some answers like that in the show. Not that answer, obviously.
Well, what was your favorite answer? What you thought was the best answer that a good guy gave?
I thought one of the profound answers. Well, I'll save my favorite answer for second. Save your favorite answer for second. I thought one of the profound answers was Jakar's answer when he goes, "What do you want?" And he goes, "I want to see the Centauri smashed." And he's angry and he's venting, and he goes, "What do you want?" And then he sort of has a moment of clarity and goes, I just want my homeland to be prosperous and peaceful and successful, and like I want the good of I want my people to be well and prosperous. I don't care beyond that, really. Not really. Everything else I thought I wanted was just in service of that. That's all I really want. I want my people to be well. And that's and Morden goes, well, whatever, that's a useless answer. I can't do anything with that.
That's a useless answer to them because they're evil. You see, because what Jakar did at that moment of clarity was he climbed up the ladder of desire. He went from his basic desire to a higher desire, and he was actually reaching toward the highest desire of all, which is the goal of all human action, which is the ultimate good that we're all aiming at. And that's why Morden couldn't do anything with him. See?
Oh, no, I agree.
So you're right, that it was a profound answer.
And then Londo, who he does eventually take on until Londo goes, the price is too high. And then, anyway. But Londo at first is like, oh, yeah, I want the Centauri Republic. But then he goes, I want us to be mighty again. I want us to take back the stars and, to be the great empire we were, back for the glory days. And Morden can work with that because he can offer him the way to achieve that by crushing his enemies and letting them stand astride the stars like they once did.
Right. He wants conquest.
Yes.
So in other words, Morden took him up to a high place and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and said, if you bow down and worship me, I'll give you this.
That sounds familiar.
Right? It sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yes, Jesus being tempted by Satan, yes.
It's always the same. Those three temptations are always very telling. Because what do you want? Well, one of the things people want is worldly dominion and glory. That's what Londo wanted. And that's all the kingdoms of the earth. See?
But my favorite answer to Mr. Morden's question, what do you want, is from Londo's attaché, Veer, who sees Morden for exactly what he is. Veer is this wonderful, wonderful character who ends up doing some terrible things, but struggles to live with it, but and is sort of Londo's conscience. But his answer to Morden is my favorite.
What do you want? I'd like to live just long enough to be there when they cut off your head and stick it on a pike, as a warning to the next 10 generations that some favors come with too high a price. I want to look up into your lifeless eyes and wave like this.
And it was just, and then,
And then he does it.
Yeah, he does
There's a later scene where Morden's head is on a pike.
Yes, and he does
Veers
it.
walks
It's
up
perfect.
and goes.
Yeah,
Since Veers is the kindest hearted, he's the nicest, most
Yes.
inoffensive guy for a race of warrior conquerors, He's like, it would be like meeting the nice Klingon, basically.
Well, yeah,
and
because
he's a
smuggling
perfect character.
Nans. He's smuggling Nans out during the war, Oscar Schindler style. He's abusing his position as Minbari ambassador to smuggle Nans out, and they think he's murdered them all, and he goes, and they're going, Veer, they're all dead, and Londo goes, oh, they're all dead. That's fine then. They're Nans. That's okay. And he's going, they're not dead, and Londo's really angry. They're not dead. And everyone's shocked. He goes, no, nobody cares about dead Nans. If they're dead, nobody cares, but we're smuggling them out. That's a good, there's so many good episodes in Babylon 5.
You find out, Babylon 5 is great at this. You find out that the character is a lot deeper than you thought he was, and he has a heart of steel. And it's the last guy you would suspect because he's really kind of wimpy and really kind of
he seems
like
inoffensive,
LeFou from Disney's Beauty and the Beast. He's really kind of a sidekick who gets kicked around. But no, he's got a core to him. He's got a core of decency to him that is saintly. Like smuggling Narns out of the concentration camp.
Smuggling Nans out, yes, Oscar Schindler style.
The fact that Veers doesn't want anything reminds me of there's a famous character from ancient stories called Amiclas, who I may have mentioned him before. He's the only guy who's not afraid of Caesar because Caesar is he has nothing to lose. He's so poor, he's so poverty-stricken that he sleeps under a boat on a bed of dried seaweed. And so when Caesar shows up at the door of his hut, he's not afraid because Caesar can take nothing from him because he has nothing. Caesar wants him to row his boat across the sea during a storm, and no one else is willing to do it. But since Amiclas is fearless, Amiclas does it. I should mention it's kind of a surprising scene for a Christian to read because at the end of it, Caesar has no gratitude whatsoever to this poor and humble man. Because pagans don't believe that the poor are blessed or that humility is a good thing. Caesar just says that the storm was unable to kill him because even the gods could not prevent Caesar's destiny from bringing Caesar forward. As you can see, quite a bit of pride there. Now, the Shadows would have had a lot of things to answer when they asked Caesar what he wanted. He would say, I want the world.
Yeah.
Alexander the Great, when he was done conquering the world, allegedly wept and threw his sword down and said, I don't have anything else to conquer. I've got everything from the Rock of Gibraltar to the coasts of India. So
what do I do now?
What do you do now? That's one problem with asking what you want, because then what do you go once you get what you want? What do you want? I once had an interesting conversation with a distant relative of mine. We were just idly talking about what would you do if you won the lottery and you had $1 zillion. He immediately said, "Oh, I would do this and that and the other thing to protect it from the tax man, to make sure that I would not be taxed on the amount." And I said, "Yes, but then what would you do if you didn't have to toil for a living?" And he said, "Well, I'd be very careful about my investments and make sure that I would, hide the money under rocks. The tax man would get it." And he couldn't move past that point. He couldn't imagine what he would do with his life or with the money if he was not toiling to get it. See?
Yeah.
So I wished I had asked him, "Who are you?" Because because what I was trying to find out is what his highest value was. I was trying to find out what was important to him, who he was really. I didn't think to ask the question at the time because I hadn't seen Babylon 5 yet. But he didn't know who he was. He thought he just thought he was just a working man, a money making machine.
Yeah.
What do you do with the money once you get money? Now, there are many people who are fabulously wealthy in our world who I wished had been asked that question when they were young and had come up with a good answer, because rather than, "Oh, I will do evil with the money and I will, I'll spread diseases and so on and so forth." But I don't remember the Babylon 5 as well as I wished I would, because I don't know. Aside from Delenn, who else answers the question as to who they are? Does anyone else really know? I don't remember the Vorlons asking other people or what the answers were.
Only her and Sheridan from memory really get asked that question.
Do you remember what Sheridan's answer is? Because I'm afraid I don't.
Not sure. I remember they both sort of, the answer they come to is in Come the Inquisitor, and I thought they both sort of came to the answer they would freely sacrifice their lives to protect the other, alone in the dark, with no one to remember or mourn them.
Because here's what's interesting: who are you is asking what your highest value is. What's at the core of your being? What's at the pinnacle of your life? What is everything you're doing aiming at? And if you answer something that's higher than your own self-preservation, you've entered a world of glory, of nobility, of self-sacrifice. You've become a hero or a saint at that point. When you say, "My life doesn't matter. I live for this. This is the point of my life. Not merely my own pleasure, not merely my own self-preservation, not merely what I want for me." You see? And the question of the shadows is directly the opposite. It's trying to draw your attention away from what's most important to you toward what's most immediate to you. If you imagine your desires as like a pyramid with the highest desire at the pinnacle, the thing that informs all your other desires, and the base is your base passions. What do you want? Well, I'd like some bread, that's and by the way, that's one of the three temptations in the desert. Is just simple hunger, just simple animal desires. Food, shelter, water, companionship, heat and cold, being protected, being not alone, not dying alone in the dark. Very simple answers. And it's perfectly appropriate for a child to want, the crib, his mother, food and comfort. But humans are rational animals. Humans can't just live for the day. The reason why I bring that up, humans as rational animals, is because I believe it's Aristotle's answer to "Who are you?" is man is a rational animal. But I've also heard a rather amusing variation of that, where someone else, I forget which philosopher it was, said man is a risible animal. And if you don't know what risible means, it means an animal who laughs. Risible means funny, means evoking laughter.
Okay.
Man is a laughing animal because none of the other animals have a sense of humor. I suppose you can tickle mice and they giggle and stuff, but that's not the same as them appreciating a really horrendous pun.
I don't know. Yeah. My dog seems to have a sense of humor. It's a small child's sense of humor, but still. I've
slapsticky sense of humor.
I've met lots of dogs.
But does he laugh?
Yeah.
Does the dog laugh?
They don't laugh like a human. But I knew a dog years ago whose I think favorite game in the world. He was just this jet black dog, and he liked to sneak up on people at night in the driveway and poke them with his nose. And startle them, so they go, "Ah!" And you'd see the teeth all grin. So, I don't know if that counts as laughter, but he seemed to enjoy that.
Other animals grin, but only man laughs. Why don't we put it?
Well, that's fine. I mean, I like the level of the humor, and it had no sophistication to it. It was a small child's humor, but nevertheless, there was a glimmer of it there. He clearly thought this was hilarious. I know my dog
Oh, don't
Annie
get
will
me wrong.
sneeze on you, and she thinks that's hilarious, judging by
Don't get
her
me wrong.
expression.
I don't think that good humor is restricted to mankind alone.
Fair enough.
But I think that a sense of humor depends on you being able to see the incongruity or the irony between two different but related worldviews. When you look at the same object suddenly in a different way,
That's
sometimes
true.
that evokes laughter. See?
That's true.
And
I
that
don't
kind of
think my
requires
dog.
an ability to switch between points of view.
Yes,
of
I don't
world.
think my dog gets that when she sneezes on me.
No, I don't think so either. I think laughter comes from being a rational animal.
So yes, I will concede that, but I think I think some of the lower animals definitely have something that approaches a sense of humor that similar to what like very small children have. So,
Sure.
certainly that's my experience of raising dogs. They are
There are
about as
animals
smart
that
as a
play
3-year-old. Yeah. Yes, they can be pranksters. So, yes.
Now, if any shadow came up to you and asked you what you wanted, and all you said is, "I wanted a good laugh," I'm not sure they could find much to get their claws on you.
No.
Because the question's only useful for them if what you want is unlawful. You see? The Stoic answer, the answer of the ancient Roman Stoics would be, "I want to have self-control." That's not something anyone can tempt you with. I want to be free from temptation. That's what my desire is.
Yes.
I want to have perfect self-control and do all my duties, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant, without flinching and without vaunting. You know, I want to be a good sport. I want to lose games without crying, and I want to win without boasting. See, those kind of desires, the desire to control your desires, are really difficult for the shadows to get their claws into you. You have to really want something like food or conquest. So what were the 3 temptations of Christ? Do you remember? Because I kind of don't.
Well, yes, Satan tempts him in the desert with bread and then takes him up to the top of the temple and says, "Cast yourself down and the angels will save you." And then the third one is takes him up to a high mountain and shows him all of the nations of the world, and they will be yours. One of the interesting things about all of those is doesn't Christ get all of those in the end anyway?
Well, here's what I like about
If he
the
follows the
temptations.
plan.
The first is that Satan doesn't tempt Christ with bread. He tempts Christ to make stones into bread, to perform a miracle to feed himself. But he's because Christ was just fasting. He's tempting him with what St. John calls the lust of the flesh. St. John identifies 3 basic temptations that all temptations fall into: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the glory of the life. And so the lust of the eyes is when you look at something you don't own and you crave it, like being king of all the kingdoms of the earth. That's the third one. The second one, the glory of life, is the same temptation that tempted Eve, because Lucifer quotes Scripture and then asks Christ to throw himself into the air so that the angels will catch him and fly him around, which I believe Simon the magician does later, according to tradition anyway, above Rome, and then St. Paul prays, and the demons bearing the flying shadow of Simon the magician aloft drop him, and he crashes and burns. So what you're saying is correct. Everything that Satan is offering him is something Christ already possesses. You see, I'm reminded of the scene in *Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe* where the White Witch promises Edmund that he will become a king in Narnia if he follows her. But in that book, he's already born a king of Narnia because he's the son of Adam. He's a human being. The Green Witch also does the same thing, promising Prince Rilian that he'll be king of Narnia when Prince Rilian is already king of Narnia. So the devil never offers you anything you can't already, it's not already yours. At least in those cases.
I suppose in the instance of Christ, the offer was bow down and worship me, and you won't have to go through all of that crucifixion stuff. Well, actually, I suppose...
Now that, I have to understand. That seems a legitimate temptation to me. I don't know if I would have the...
But it's just...
again...
It's taking a shortcut, effectively. If you bow down and worship me, I'll give you... I mean, that's the offer of the shadows, too. We can make you great and glorious again. If you can do it the hard way, or we can aid you with our fancy shadow vessels.
Yeah, you don't need to do all the fighting yourself. We'll just go bomb them for you.
We're just going to kick the crap out of everybody for you. Yeah.
Yeah, with our super weapons. And what's funny is if you answer the question wrongly, it's because if you're Christ and you're not willing to go through the passion of the Christ in order to get the resurrection of Christ, the devil's asking you to put yourself above your goal, to be self-centered about it, to preserve yourself, so you don't have to to suffer it. Now, I'm not saying Christ would not have done it another way if God had wanted him to do it another way. He prays in Gethsemane and asks the cup to pass him by. It's not something anyone's supposed to welcome. But the question also, like I said before, is trying to find out what's your core, what's your highest answer, and the Christian answer, which all the Christians are supposed to model Christ, is to put love above self.
Your will be done.
Isn't that very similar to what Delenn and Sheridan do when they answer the torturer, the Inquisitor of the Vorlons? When they answer, even if I have to die alone in the dark, it doesn't matter. You see, even if I have to die a horrible death by torture, because I don't regard myself as the be all and end all of everything. But every time you ask me, what do I want? What do you want? I can't answer. How can I say this? The answer the Vorlons approve of is an unselfish answer. I want something bigger than myself. I want universal peace. I want my planet to prosper. I want mankind to be saved. Okay? That's an unselfish answer. That's the hero's answer. That's the saintly answer. But if you ask me, what do you want? I'm immediately thinking about myself. Well, I want bread. I want people to glorify me. I want to be a king. I want all sorts of stuff,
Yep.
For me, well, that's a Buddhist would not answer the same way. And I have great respect for Buddhists, though I think they're not perfectly right. I think they're on the road to being right. When the Buddhist said, I want to destroy my ego, I think my desire is the source of suffering. You see, if you were a Buddhist and the shadows came and said, what do you want? The Buddhist would interpret that question to mean, how can I make you suffer? Because the Buddha taught that desire was the source of suffering. Attachment to worldly things is what caused pain and discontent.
I've always found Buddhism odd in that I was listening to a series of lectures by Peter Kreeft, and he was touching on it, and I was struck. He didn't make this connection, but it sort of struck me that Buddhism is a philosophy for surviving in hell.
Yeah.
Free of temptation, free of, because hell, as far as I can tell, people argue about it, but, all of the imagery in the Bible is metaphor to some degree. And the takeaway message from it is not, oh, this is exactly what it's going to be like. It's just, you want to avoid this. This is not made for you. And hell, whatever it is, Dante in the Inferno has written above the gates of hell, abandon hope, all ye who enter here. And it strikes me, I could be wrong, but the worst part of hell is you're stuck there forever. If you remember back to the Twilight Zone episode, the other place that Rocky Valentine is sent to is relatively pleasant. I mean, he can eat whatever he wants. He can have the women he wants. He'll win at all his gambling. I mean, you could, in theory, be content there, but you're stuck there forever with the unavoidable knowledge that you have missed out on life with God, like life with the source of the true, the good, and the beautiful. You're cut off from that forever. That seems to be what hell is. Hell is that you did this to yourself, you can't escape that knowledge, and that you're stuck here forever because of what you did to yourself. And it's having to live with that. That strikes me as hell, but,
I think you're right. And I think that Mr. Pip from the Twilight Zone episode, was a shadow.
Well, yeah.
Because what did he ask Rocky Valentine? What's the first thing he asked Rocky Valentine? He said,
what do you want?
Well, what do you want?
Yep.
And then he gave the guy what he wanted, and that was the point of the episode. You give if you give an evil man what he wants, it won't make him happy. You see. You yourself just said, in hell you're cut off from God. Well, what is God?
true.
Well, no
the
matter
good, and the
what
beautiful.
else God is, he has to be the source and the summit of human life. He's got to be the thing at which human life is aiming. Most atheists don't believe in God, but the God they don't believe in is not any God that I would recognize. The God they don't believe in is just Zeus, just the king of the universe. But the king of the universe is not anything worth talking about. He's the point of life, the goal to which all things are directed is the good. Is not just a momentary good, but a blessedness. Well, if God is the goal of life, then hell is being cut off from God, and swapping God, the highest good, for some lesser good, wine, women, and song, or whatever it is you gave up for him, the pride of life, the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, that is hell. And you'll also be burned. By the way, you'll also be flung into a lake of fire. I mean, should just mention that's also there.
Well, no, that's true. I mean, that's the imagery that's used in John's Apocalypse. But,
right.
I mean, I don't want to make light of hell, but that...
No, because there's no light in it. It's all dark.
Well, but hell could be relatively pleasant in one sense, but be the worst place in the universe because...
Right.
You're cut off forever from the true, the good, and the beautiful, and you're cut off forever from... And you've done this to yourself, and you can't escape that knowledge. I mean... The comforting human illusions are all going to be stripped away. Yeah,
exactly. The truth of hell. You won't be able to lie to yourself anymore, and that's what most people, it's not a minority. Most people live their lives as a lie. So asking them what they want is merely asking them to get closer to the lie, and asking them who they are is asking them to turn around and look at the truth. That's why it's such a profound question.
It's I was thinking it's interesting with the question, what do you want? And the question, who are you? The answer that Delenn and Sheridan give, it's like to die alone in the dark, to die as part of a cause that's greater than yourself. I mean, it's been said, if there's nothing in your life worth dying for, then you have nothing worth living for either. That's always struck me as quite profound. If there's nothing bigger than your continued existence to you that you value, are you even really human anymore?
If you are the only God you yourself are worshiping, then you're a mighty petty God, and you're not worth worshiping.
Well, of course.
If you're the biggest thing in your life is really small.
Like, I mean, if you have nothing beyond yourself, nothing bigger than you to be a part of, like,
right?
What
that is why, by the way,
what
these people
you?
who lose God usually turn into some sort of crazy crusader or reformer, where they want to change the world or change society, is because they still have the human instinct to find something greater, lovelier, more beautiful, and more noble than themselves. And since they've left the path of truth, they have to find it in a falsehood. They have to find it, since they're not on their way to the New Jerusalem, they have to try to get on the road to utopia. That's their sorrow. That's their misery. Yeah. And again, they end up just like Londo in his war. By the way, the Shadows lived up to their promises. They allowed the Centauri to conquer. They didn't cheat the guy in that way. See, that wasn't what was going on. He got what he wanted, good and hard. You see, but the price was just terrifying.
Well, it costs, because Londo later on he decides actually this deal with Mr. Morden is a bad deal, and then Morden goes, okay, moves on from Londo to one of Londo's associates who's even more corrupt than him, and Londo has that associate killed, and Morden responds by murdering. There's a dancer he meets in the first season that he's in love with, and he loves her, and she's coming back to him, and Morden has her murdered, and then he goes and kills. Morden makes him think it was.
It
his
becomes
associate.
very Romanesque at that point. It becomes very Byzantine at that point. It becomes Suetonius at that point.
It gets all out of hand.
It just shows that the show is really well written.
Yeah.
It's because that's what would really happen in that kind of society.
But then, Londo goes mad and wants just to burn let it all burn at that point. He goes full in with the shadows. It's actually maybe it's an aside. Londo gets a gift from the Emperor, and what he wants is to divorce his 3 wives.
Yeah.
And remember that episode where he meets the 3 wives, and the Emperor grants him a divorce from his 3 wives, but he says keep one of them for, official functions and things. And he keeps the really Harridan-y one that doesn't really like him at all. It's a married one. And she's mean, but he goes, but he keeps her. And it's like, why? Well, I know exactly what I'm getting with you. They actually explored that further in one of the books. They tell the story of, it sort of goes into the time in Londo's life where he's got the Druck keeper on him.
The eyeball on his neck.
And
I'm sorry, I talked over you. It was, what's it called, a keeper?
A keeper, yes.
It was a piece of biotechnology that was there to watch him and to keep him in line. Spy that was like grown into his nervous system, so he couldn't escape it. It was one of the most
and he discovers if he gets drunk, it falls asleep. It doesn't hold its liquor well. And they explore this, but they actually have a whole series. There's a bit with Timon, his wife, and actually he ends up having to send her away because the shadows know because he has affection for her and cares for her. And sees her as like quite a good woman, unlike the other 2 that just wanted him for his position and power. And then he has to, I was really sad because he has to send her away, and like just sort of even though he realizes he actually cares for her and loves her, because he does, he has to be really mean and push her away, because otherwise. That'll give them leverage.
I haven't read the book, but it sounds like what you're saying is his growing affection for her is a danger to the shadows.
Well, it's a danger to her because she's vulnerable. Well, yes.
If you're trying to control a person by what he wants, once you start, love is when you put another's good above your own good. Whether you love a country or love your wife, and so. Love is actually the escape, is the way to escape the shadows. It's the way to escape being controlled by your desires. Because it is a thing greater than yourself.
Sort of. Well, I mean, the thing is, the keeper's on him to keep him in line and torture him if he gets out of line. So the keeper's there because he won't do as he's told. The keeper's there to stop him getting out of line in future. But he has to push Timon away because if he gives in to loving her and having a life with her, then that's something they can use against him.
Yeah, then she's under a threat too.
And so he pushes her away. It's really sad. It's a really sad scene in the book. I don't know if they're still in print. It's a pity they're not. They're good books. They were good. They had a whole... They wrote 2 arcs of books. One followed the life of Alfred Bester from the Psy Corps, played by Walter Koenig. Just an amazing character.
Played brilliantly by Walter Koenig, I should say.
Koenig?
And one of my favorite scenes has him in it where he's threatening Sheridan. And this is after Sheridan has been to Zahadum and been dead and been resurrected from the dead. And comes back as kind of a messianic figure and organizes a rebellion against the corruption of the government, which is at the time was science fiction, but now is actually taking place in my country. And except instead of psychics reading your mind, we have social media, which is hypnotizing your mind.
Yeah.
But Sheridan gives an answer when Bester threatens him, very politely, mind you, because Bester's a very polite fellow. Sheridan says, "Well, what are you going to do to me? Kill me? I've been dead." You know. And a guy who's not afraid to die, you can't control him either by saying, "What do you desire?" You know, because no matter what you desire, if I can kill you, then I can take away your desire. Unless your desire is for something greater than life, greater than your own life, and in which case you're immune. You're immune to threats. See, and this is true not just for good people, but for bad people as well. Religious fanatics who blow themselves up with bombs. The reason why they can do that is because they're just not afraid of anything in this life. You know, so it's not the complete answer. You not only do you have to love something beyond life, but it's got to be the good something and not the bad one. It has to be the light and not the darkness.
It has to be the right thing.
Both those things are eternal, and both those things are beyond life.
So we're coming up to an hour. So what is the? How do you answer the question? What do you want? And how do you answer the question? Who am I?
What I want is I once had a dream where I thought God asked me what I wanted, and the only thing, and I said, I want you, Lord. And the reason why I answered that is because Thomas Aquinas had a real vision where that actually happened to him, and he gave that answer.
Yeah.
And it's a great answer, because if you get the Lord, you get everything. If you answer for other things, you don't necessarily get them. Naturally, there are prayers I would like to have answered. There are things I want in life. But if I was as bold as Aquinas, I would give the answer I gave in my dream, which is you, Lord. That's all I want.
You, Lord,
because what?
You.
I want everything. I want the eternity of infinite bliss. I'd like infinity, please, and a place big enough to stow it. So that would be my answer for what I want, and that would be an answer that is of no use to the shadows. Not even to the shadows that live in me, I should say.
Well, yes.
As for who I am, I will answer the same way a saint in old Norway answered. He was speaking to a king, and I forget the king's name, Harold or Rothgild or something like that. And they were in a longhouse. They were in a hall with the doors open to either side, with the fire burning in the middle of the fire pit. And a bird flew in out of the winter sky through the hall, through one door and out the other. And the saint pointed at that bird and said, human life comes from where we do not know. We see it for a moment in the light, and then it's gone. And the other, I should mention that the setup is that the counselors of the king were debating with the king whether they should take the saint's offer to baptize them, to become Christian. And when he asked the counselors their advice, one of the counselors pointed at the bird that had just flown through and said, we don't know what's outside, what's before birth, and we don't know what's after death. And if these men know, then we should ally with them, because that's the answer. You see, otherwise we're just like that bird. We don't know who we are. We don't know where we're coming from. We don't know where we're going. So the Christian answer is, well, who are you? Well, I'm a child of God. I'm made in the image and likeness of God. Where we're going, death, judgment, heaven, hell. One of those four. One of those two. Yeah. Okay. Maybe purgatory in between if you're a Catholic. What do I want? I want my desires to be, I want my will to be aligned with divine will, because my will is, so far, has proved no good to me. I don't have to go through what Landor went through to find out that my desires for lust and conquest are not going to lead me to a nice place. Okay. You don't have to be as old as me. You don't have to have gray in your beard before you realize that your lusts of desires. Do you want to be as rich as Martin Bankman-Fried, or whatever that guy's name is? Wealthiest man on the planet, and now he's in jail, or he's going to jail, okay? Yep. Do you want to be him? Do you want to be a conqueror like Stalin, who died in bed, and his servants were so afraid to open his door they would not get him a doctor, and so he just died coughing? I mean, or Hitler, the great conqueror Hitler, who had the glory of the world, and he committed suicide after poisoning his own dog. He fed his poison pill to his dog, Goldie, because he wasn't sure if his people were willing to kill him, really, or if they were just going to stun him and hand him over to the Soviets. That's why he poisoned his own dog. Oh. Now, do you want to be a king? These guys were kings. These guys were leaders. Okay? No. I say thee nay. I would rather not have those things. I will be happy with whatever life the good Lord gives me. No, don't get me wrong. There's things I would like. That would be nice. But who I am, the answer is I don't know. Who I would like to be is what I just said. Is what I just said the Christian identity was, which is the Son of God. That's what I'd like to be. I'd like to live up to that. I'd like to live up to be worthy of the promises of Christ. I don't think I can do it on my own. No. So that's my answer as to who I am and what I want. And I also would like to sell some books. So go to johncwright.com. Go to sci-fi-rate.com and buy dozens of the Golden Age and Orphans of Chaos and my other wonderful science fiction and fantasy books.
Of course.
There we go.
Well, I apart from desiring to sell a whole lot of books that I haven't written, I think I would agree with you. Who am I? I am a child of God. I'm lots of things, but hopefully that, at the end of the day, is what will matter. And what do I want? Yeah. To be told, well done, good and faithful servant.
Oh, that's a good one.
Well,
I wish I'd thought of that.
well, that's okay. Well, you know, Jesus said,
No, that's
I'm
a
just
good
borrowing
answer.
from him.
That's a good answer. Because you know what I'm afraid of? Honest to God, afraid of?
Being told otherwise.
Get away from me, you worker of iniquity. I never knew you.
Yeah.
And then I'll go, but Lord, I did all these things in your name. Oh, no. That is a horrifying passage, and every Christian should be chilled.
It is.
That those words came from the mouth of our Lord. So if
is.
it was up to me, I would have picked a much nicer religion like Viking, because then I could just die in battle and I'd be good. You know,
That seems easy.
I'd
Yes.
get to be feasting on good flesh while I was waiting for the Ragnarok. You know, that's it's a completely hopeless religion. But it's not the reason why I believe in Christianity, because it's not the religion I would have picked if I were picking a religion. It's true because it's true. So what do I want as a philosopher? My main desire is for the truth, because I think the truth is also contained to the beautiful and the good. I think the truth will tell me how to live. I think the truth will tell me how to find joy. I'm not afraid of the truth. I'm not H.P. Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft thought the truth would drive you mad. You see, because he didn't believe in God. So,
well, that truth will drive you mad.
My other answer is, what do I want? Is I want the truth, and who am I? Is I'm a philosopher. I'm a guy who seeks the truth. But that's not all of what I am, because I'm like the bird. I'm not sure where I come from, where I'm going, except I have a good authority. Let me put it that way. I have certain things I take on faith because I believe the people who told them to me.
I think
so that's my answer.
I think that's a good place to
I
go.
also would like to see Morden's head on a pike and then wave at him like Veers does. That's the other thing I would.
Yes, there would be some more than momentary satisfaction to that.
There we go.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.